My husband smiled when he told me his ex was coming to our Christmas dinner. Not an apologetic smile. Not even an uncomfortable one. A calm, almost amused smile. My ex is joining us for Christmas dinner, Daniel said, scrolling through his phone as if he were announcing the weather. Be mature about it. I stared at him for a few seconds. Then I nodded. Of course. What Daniel didn't know was that I had already made one phone call that afternoon. And that phone call was about to turn our carefully planned family Christmas into something none of us would ever forget. For 3 years, I had heard about Claire. Claire had been his college girlfriend. Claire had known his parents before I did. Claire had apparently been like family long before I entered Daniel's life. I had never complained about her. At least, not openly. When old photographs appeared on his phone, I didn't ask him to delete them. When his mother occasionally mentioned Claire during dinner, I smiled politely. And when Daniel once told me that Claire had always been important to him, I simply said, I understand. Maybe I was too understanding. Because over the past few months, something about Daniel had changed. He started protecting his phone. He turned it face down whenever I entered the room. He began taking calls outside. And there were several nights when he came home late with explanations that sounded rehearsed. Still, I didn't accuse him of anything. I had learned a long time ago that accusations could make an innocent person defensive. But they could also make a guilty person careless. That was why, when Daniel told me Claire would be sitting at our Christmas table, I didn't argue. Instead, I went upstairs, closed the bedroom door, and called someone I had never expected to contact. Claire's fiancé. His name was Ethan. I had never met him before. But I knew exactly where to find his number. Because 2 weeks earlier, while Daniel was asleep beside me, I had seen a message on his phone that wasn't meant for me. It was from Claire. There were only 6 words. He still doesn't know the truth. I had spent 14 days wondering what the truth meant. Now, I was finally going to find out. I called Ethan. He answered on the 4th ring. Hello. I took a breath. Ethan, my name is Emma. I'm Daniel's wife. There was a long silence. Then his voice changed. You're his wife. Yes. Another silence. Then he quietly asked, why are you calling me? I looked at the Christmas decorations glowing through our bedroom window. Because Claire is having dinner with us tomorrow. He didn't respond. And I think, I continued, you should be there too. What happened next made me realize that Claire wasn't the only person who had been keeping secrets. And neither was my husband. End of part 1. Continue. Ethan didn't answer immediately. For several seconds, all I could hear was the faint static of the phone. Then he said, you need to tell me everything. I don't know everything, I admitted. That's why I'm calling you. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Then we're in the same situation. That sentence made my stomach tighten. What do you mean? I mean Claire told me something 6 months ago, Ethan said. Something about Daniel. I sat down on the edge of the bed. What did she tell you? She said Daniel had contacted her again. My fingers tightened around the phone. Recently. Not recently. It started last spring. That was months before I had noticed anything strange. Ethan continued. At first, Claire said they were only talking. She told me it was harmless. Then she started deleting messages. I closed my eyes. So you think they're having an affair? I thought that. The way he said it made me pause. You don't anymore? No. Why? Because 3 weeks ago, Claire told me she was thinking about leaving me. I felt my chest tighten. For Daniel. I assumed so. There was another silence. Then Ethan said something that completely changed the conversation. She told me Daniel wasn't the reason. I stood up. What? She said Daniel was helping her with something. Something neither of us was supposed to know about. I walked toward the bedroom window. Outside, snow had started falling over the street, covering the cars and sidewalks in white. What kind of something? I don't know, Ethan said. But I found an email. What did it say? I'll show you tomorrow. My heart began beating faster. Tomorrow. At Christmas dinner. I almost laughed from disbelief. So you knew about the dinner? Claire told me. And she knows you're coming? No. That answer sent a strange chill through me. I suddenly realized what I had done. I hadn't invited Ethan because I wanted revenge. I had invited him because I needed the truth. But now, for the first time, I wondered whether bringing him into that dining room was going to expose something much bigger than an old relationship. Before hanging up, Ethan said one last thing. Emma. Yes. Whatever you do tomorrow, don't confront Daniel before dinner. Why? Because if I'm right about what I found. He stopped. What? I think Daniel has been lying to both of us. The call ended. I stood alone in the bedroom, staring at the dark screen. Downstairs, Daniel was laughing while decorating the Christmas tree. He had no idea Ethan was coming. And he had absolutely no idea that I had already started putting the pieces together. But the next morning, I found something in Daniel's coat pocket that made me question whether inviting Ethan had been the right decision after all. End of part 2. Continue. The next morning, I found Daniel's coat hanging beside the front door. I was looking for my keys when something hard slipped from the inside pocket and landed on the floor. A small black USB drive. I stared at it. Daniel had never used USB drives. Everything he did was on his phone or laptop. I picked it up. There was no label on it. For a moment, I thought about putting it back. Then I remembered Ethan's warning. Daniel has been lying to both of us. I carried the drive upstairs and plugged it into my laptop. There was only one folder. December 18th. Inside were 3 files. The first was a scanned bank statement. The second was a photograph. The third was a PDF with Claire's name on it. My hands went cold. I opened the bank statement first. It showed repeated transfers from an account belonging to Daniel. Large transfers. Not hundreds of dollars. Thousands. And every payment had gone to the same company. A company I had never heard of. I opened the photograph. It was a picture of Daniel and Claire standing outside a small office building. But the date on the photograph was from almost 2 years ago, before I had married Daniel. I felt a strange relief. Maybe this wasn't an affair. Maybe there was another explanation. Then I opened the PDF. It was a legal document. At the bottom was Daniel's signature, and beneath his signature was Claire's. I read the first page twice because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was an agreement involving a property that belonged to my family. My stomach dropped. That property had been left to me by my father before he died. I had never told Daniel the full details because the inheritance was still being settled. Or at least, I thought it was. I quickly opened the second page. There was a date. 3 days from now. And suddenly, everything clicked. Christmas dinner wasn't just about Claire. Daniel had invited her because something was supposed to happen afterward. Something involving my property. I heard footsteps downstairs. Daniel. I pulled the USB drive from the laptop and slipped it into my robe pocket. Then I closed everything. A few seconds later, Daniel appeared in the doorway. Morning, he said casually. I smiled. Morning. His eyes moved toward the laptop, then back to me. For just a fraction of a second, his expression changed. He knew something. Maybe not what I'd found, but he knew the USB was missing. And that was when I realized tomorrow's Christmas dinner wasn't going to be a confrontation. It was going to be a trap. End of part 3. Continue. Daniel stood in the doorway for another second. Then he smiled. Looking for something? I shook my head. My keys. He nodded, but his eyes stayed on me. Found them. Eventually. He walked away. I waited until I heard him downstairs before taking the USB drive from my pocket again. There was one thing I still hadn't opened. The photograph. I zoomed in. The office building behind Daniel and Claire belonged to the same company receiving the money from Daniel's account. But there was something else in the picture. A man standing behind them. Older. Gray hair. Dark coat. I recognized him immediately. He was my father's former business attorney. My heart sank. My father had spent the last year of his life warning me not to trust certain people. I had always assumed he meant one of his business partners. Now I wasn't so sure. I called Ethan again. He answered almost immediately. I found something, I said. So did I. His voice sounded different. More serious. What did you find? The company Daniel has been sending money to. Silence. Then Ethan said, I know that company. My pulse quickened. How? Because Claire worked there. I froze. She didn't tell me she worked there, I whispered. She didn't tell me either. That was when Ethan sent me a photograph. It showed Claire sitting across a conference table from Daniel, and between them was a folder. On the folder was my father's name. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. Ethan. I know, he said quietly. What is this? I don't know yet. But you're coming tonight. No, he replied. My heart stopped. What? I said I'm coming to dinner. But I'm not coming alone. Before I could ask who else was coming, the doorbell rang downstairs. Daniel called my name. Emma, your Christmas surprise is here. I walked downstairs. And standing beside Daniel was Claire. She smiled warmly. Almost too warmly. Then her eyes dropped to my hands. For a second, I thought she was looking for the USB drive. But then she whispered something that made my blood run cold. Emma, we need to talk before everyone arrives. I looked at Daniel. He was already walking away. Claire stepped closer. I know you found it. My heart stopped. Found what? She stared directly into my eyes. The USB. End of part 4. Continue. The attorney's words made the entire room go silent. I'm afraid we've run out of time. Daniel looked at him. You weren't supposed to come here. The attorney shook his head. Neither were you supposed to keep this from Emma. I turned toward my husband. You knew. Daniel closed his eyes. Yes. That one word hurt more than anything else. I stepped back. How long? Almost 2 years. I felt the room spinning around me. 2 years. 2 years of conversations I thought were ordinary. 2 years of trusting the man standing in front of me. Claire stepped closer. Emma, please listen. No, I said. I've listened enough. Ethan placed a folder on the dining table. I think you should see this. I opened it. Inside were copies of bank transfers, property documents, and correspondence between my father's attorney and Daniel. But one document made my hands freeze. It was a transfer agreement for my father's property. My name was on it. But the signature wasn't mine. Someone had forged it. And beneath the forged signature was the name of the company receiving Daniel's money. I looked at the attorney. Who did this? He didn't answer immediately. Then he looked at Daniel. Daniel's face had gone pale again. The person who ordered the forgery, the attorney said, was someone inside your family. I couldn't breathe. My family. He nodded. Someone who knew exactly what your father left you. Daniel finally spoke. We were trying to identify that person before they could legally take control of the property. I looked at Claire. That's why you two were meeting. She nodded. And the messages? I wanted you to think Daniel was hiding an affair, she said. Because if the person watching us believed we were fighting about something personal, they wouldn't realize we were investigating them. Then Ethan pulled out one final photograph. It showed a Christmas dinner from 3 years earlier. My family was sitting around the table. My mother, my brother, my sister, and in the background, barely visible near the doorway, was the same person who had signed the forged documents. My breath caught. I knew that face. I had trusted that person my entire life. Daniel reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Whoever did this, I whispered. They're here tonight, aren't they? The attorney looked toward the front door. Then the doorbell rang. Once. Twice. Daniel looked at me. And I knew. The real Christmas dinner was finally beginning. End of part 6. The doorbell rang again. Once. Twice. Nobody moved. Then my mother walked through the front door. She smiled when she saw all of us standing around the dining table. "Merry Christmas," she said. I couldn't answer. My brother followed behind her, carrying a bottle of wine. Then my sister entered. The same sister who had always known about my father's property. The same sister whose face I had just seen in the photograph. I looked at the attorney. He gave me the smallest nod. My sister noticed the documents on the table. Her smile disappeared. "What is this?" I picked up the forged transfer agreement. "This." She stared at it. Then at Daniel. Then at Claire. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, my mother whispered, "You weren't supposed to find out this way." My entire body went cold. I looked at her. "You knew." She started crying. My sister immediately stepped forward. "Mom, don't." But it was too late. My mother confessed. My sister had been drowning in debt after a business she started failed. She believed my father had promised her the property before his death. When he left it to me instead, she became desperate. She had forged my signature and secretly tried to transfer the property. Daniel discovered the attempt through one of my father's old business contacts. Instead of confronting her immediately, he worked with Claire and the attorney to uncover the entire scheme. The money I thought Daniel had been sending to Claire had actually been used to pay investigators and legal expenses. And the USB? It contained the evidence they had collected. I looked at my husband. "You should have told me." "I wanted to," he said. "But your father's last request was that we find the person responsible before accusing anyone." I looked at my sister. She was crying now. "I was scared," she whispered. "I thought Dad had chosen you because he loved you more." That sentence hurt. Not because it excused what she had done, but because suddenly, I understood where all that resentment had come from. I didn't forgive her that night. Maybe forgiveness wasn't something I could force just because it was Christmas. But I did something I hadn't expected. I asked everyone to sit down. The dinner table was still covered with candles, plates, and untouched Christmas food. Claire sat beside Ethan. Daniel sat across from me. My family sat in silence. And for the first time, nobody pretended everything was perfect. The truth had finally taken its place at our table. Months later, the property remained mine, and my sister faced the consequences of what she had done. Daniel and I also had difficult conversations. Our marriage survived, but it changed. I learned that trust isn't simply believing someone. Sometimes, trust means having the courage to demand the truth. And that Christmas taught me something I'll never forget. The people sitting closest to you aren't always the people who know you best. Sometimes, the person you think is betraying you is secretly protecting you. And sometimes, the person you trust most is the one whose fear makes them cross a line they can never uncross. If you had been sitting at that Christmas table, would you have forgiven my sister? Or would you have walked away for good?